For 7 years, two women had been married to the same man, and neither one knew the other existed until a misdirected phone call changed everything on a Tuesday morning in March. Nora was standing in her kitchen, pouring her second cup of coffee, when her phone buzzed on the counter. She didn't recognize the number, but she answered anyway. The woman on the other end of the line sounded rushed, distracted, the kind of voice that belonged to someone juggling three things at once. She asked for Daniel, said she needed to remind him about their son's school recital at 4 o'clock, said she was his wife. Nora set her coffee down very slowly, because she was Daniel's wife too. But to understand how she got here, standing barefoot in the kitchen of a life that had just turned to smoke, we need to go back 7 years, to the beginning. She met Daniel Holt at a friend's engagement party in Atlanta. He was the kind of man who made a room feel smaller just by being confident in it. Easy laugh, sharp eyes, the sort of person who remembered your name the second time, even if they'd only heard it once. Nora was 31, freshly out of a long relationship, not looking for anything serious. Daniel seemed to sense that. He didn't push. He was patient in a way that felt, at the time, like respect. They dated for 18 months before he proposed. He said he'd never felt this certain about anything. He got down on one knee at the restaurant where they'd had their first date, and every woman at the surrounding tables started crying before Nora even said yes. She said yes. They married in October. Small ceremony, her family and his. His family was sparse. An older brother he described as estranged, a mother who'd passed years earlier. Nora hadn't pushed for details. Some people carry grief quietly. She understood that. Or she thought she did. What she didn't know was that 11 months before he proposed to her, Daniel had already married someone else. Her name was Carrie. She lived in Charlotte, 2 hours away. She had a real estate business, a golden retriever, and a 4-year-old son, Daniel's son, named Ben. And Daniel had been dividing his life in half ever since. He worked in logistics consulting, which meant he traveled. A lot. Nora had never questioned it because it had always been there, woven into the fabric of their relationship from the very beginning. 2 weeks home, 10 days away, sometimes longer. He called every night, texted throughout the day, remembered every small thing she mentioned. He was, by every observable measure, a devoted husband. He just had another one. Nora had never met his brother, had never visited his childhood home, had never once found an inconsistency, a gap, a receipt out of place. Because Daniel was meticulous in a way that now, she understood, had nothing to do with personality. It was architecture. He had built 2 separate lives with the precision of a man who knew exactly what he was protecting. And then his second wife called the wrong number. The silence on the line lasted only a few seconds. Then Carrie's voice shifted. Just slightly, a change in texture. "I'm sorry," she said carefully. "Who is this?" Nora told her. Her name, her married name, Holt. There was a long pause, and then Carrie said very quietly, "Oh my God." They stayed on the phone for 2 hours. It was the strangest conversation of Nora's life. 2 women, completely composed on the outside, systematically dismantling 7 years of shared history between them. Comparing dates, comparing stories, comparing the version of Daniel they each knew. Carrie had met him at a conference in Charlotte 8 years ago. He'd proposed after 2 years of dating. They'd had a small wedding. His family was sparse, he'd said, an older brother, a mother who'd passed. He called every night. He traveled for work. By the time they finished talking, the coffee Nora had poured was stone cold, and she hadn't moved from that spot by the counter. She did not call Daniel. She did not text him. She did not cry. She sat down at the kitchen table, and she started thinking. What Nora did next surprised even the people who knew her best. Her sister expected rage, screaming, throwing things, a dramatic confrontation at the airport when Daniel landed. Her best friend assumed she'd go straight to a lawyer. But Nora had always been the kind of person who, when something went deeply wrong, went very still, and in that stillness, she got precise. She called Carrie back the next morning, not to cry together, to plan. Carrie, it turned out, was furious in a different way. Sharper, more practical, burning with the particular anger of a woman who had raised a child largely alone, while the man who fathered him played house in Atlanta. She had questions. She wanted answers. But more than anything, she wanted it to mean something. They met in person 4 days later, at a coffee shop exactly halfway between their two cities. They sat across from each other for the first time, two women who had unknowingly shared a husband, and what struck them both was how unsurprised they were by each other. Daniel had a type, apparently. Capable, independent, trusting. They compared financial documents. That's when it got worse. Daniel had taken out a joint home equity line on the Charlotte house, Carrie's house, the one in her name, without her full understanding of the terms. He had also, Nora discovered, been slowly siphoning money from their joint savings account into a third account she'd never seen. Over 7 years, it totaled just under $62,000. He wasn't just living two lives, he was funding them both and building a third exit. Nora took that information to a forensic accountant. Carrie hired her own attorney, and the two of them, without a single emotional phone call to Daniel, without a single warning, spent the next 6 weeks building a case so complete that when it was finally presented to the police, to Daniel's employer, to his professional licensing board, there was nothing left to argue about. Bigamy is a felony in both Georgia and North Carolina. Daniel landed at Hartsfield-Jackson on a Thursday evening in April, rolling his carry-on through the terminal, already texting what Nora could only assume was one of two wives, when he looked up and found her standing at the arrivals gate. She watched his face cycle through 4 distinct emotions in under 2 seconds: surprise, relief, something close to pleasure. And then, as he registered her expression, something else entirely. "Hey," he said carefully, "you didn't have to come all the way." "Carrie says hello," Nora said. The carry-on stopped rolling. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. 2 officers from the Atlanta Police Department were already walking toward them from the right, and a third was approaching from behind. Daniel Holt was arrested at 7:43 p.m. on a Thursday, surrounded by travelers dragging luggage toward the exit, and a woman who had not looked away from him once. He was charged with bigamy, fraud, and financial exploitation. Carrie's attorney filed a separate civil suit. The third financial account, the exit fund, was frozen within 48 hours and later divided, by court order, between the 2 women he had deceived. The house in Atlanta sold 8 months later. Nora used her share to put a deposit on a small place in Savannah, closer to the coast, closer to her sister. She had dinner on that new porch the night she got the keys, a glass of wine in her hand, and the kind of quiet around her that doesn't feel lonely. Carrie sent her a text that night, just 3 words: "We did good." Nora looked out at the water for a long time before she typed back, "Yeah, we did." There's a version of this story where Nora falls apart, where the betrayal breaks something in her that doesn't fully heal. And maybe parts of her did break. But what this story is really about is what she chose to do in the 2 seconds after the world stopped making sense. She didn't collapse, she didn't lash out. She got quiet, and she got smart, and she found the one other person in the world who understood exactly what had been taken, and together they made sure it cost him everything. Some people spend their whole lives building a house of lies. They just never think about what happens when the walls come down all at once. If this story hit you, make sure to like this video and subscribe. We post new stories every week. And drop a comment. What would you have done in her place?